There is a war going on, a spiritual war, a war between truth and deception. Only one thing cuts through all the lies and opinions of man. It's the truth of an ancient book. It is God's word. It is God's sword.
Join me in Genesis chapter 40, and let's continue this study through the book of Genesis, and we continue in the life of Joseph. We remember that Joseph had been last week in our study sold into slavery by his brothers and then falsely accused of attempted rape and sent to prison. Twice we read last week that the Lord was with Joseph. We read that the Lord was with him in his slavery, and we read that the Lord was with him in his imprisonment. The Lord was with Joseph. It was interesting that the evidence of the Lord being with Joseph was seen in such things as what we read last, how God gave him favor with the keeper of the prison. God gave him success in applying his business skills and managing. God gave him the strength to continue to work, and despite the fact that he's in a place of great pain. And that does speak to you and me about how to handle our own pain, our own troubles. You can spend your whole time just focused on where you're not and where you wish you were, or you can just get busy. Just get busy. Get busy and seek to be a blessing. We'll see some more of that here in chapter 40. Chapter 40, verse 1 says, "And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord the king of Egypt. The Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. And they continued a season in ward." A season. Man, time just keeps passing. Joe was sold as a slave when he was about 17. Now he's in his late 20s at this particular season, imprisoned. Time is passing. He's getting older. And I am absolutely sure that he does not see himself on his way to great blessing. I'm absolutely sure he doesn't see himself as on his way to a marriage to a princess. But he seeks to stay busy. And so he continues to serve. Now, it would seem that the Pharaoh at this point in Egypt's history is an older man, and we'll read in chapter 41, Pharaoh, a new Pharaoh, who is a younger man. And this older man apparently experienced an assassination attempt because both of the people, somebody tried to poison him, because both of the people that he has imprisoned are those two who are in those roles of sort of controlling what comes into the body of the Pharaoh. So the butler, he is this wine taster, the baker in charge of his food, they're both incarcerated. Verse 5 says, "And they dreamed a dream, both of them. Each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. The butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. Then Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad." Now that always amuses me. It's the King James Version. I prefer King James Version for textual reasons, but I don't think sad is it's not the most accurate translation of the Hebrew thought. Some of the newer versions will say they were dejected or they were troubled. their countenance reflected that they were absolutely tormented by what happened the night before. And what did it mean? But King James Version says they were sad. Well, generally speaking, everybody in prison is sad. Verse 7, and he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? And you read that from the King James Version and you just picture bubbly, happy morning person, Joe, coming and going, good morning, Egypt. And why do you guys look so sad? It wasn't quite like that. However, please take note. That Joseph is not so consumed with his troubles that he's turned inward, as people have a tendency to do. People get ingrown eyeballs when they're consumed with trouble. Joe is at least in tune enough to be aware that they're troubled and to concern himself with their troubles. And that does certainly speak to the virtue of our guy, Joseph. Why? Why are you looking so troubled today? I mean, I get it, you're in prison. But clearly something happened last night. What's the deal? Well, they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream. I bet that's as far as they got before our Jewish Joseph went, oy, hey, dreams. Oh. He knows a dream can cause you some trouble. We dreamed a dream, and there's no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. That, my friends, was time-lapse photography before anybody had invented photography. You've seen it. Just a vine, and shoots, and then blossoms, and then fruit. It all happened in his dream. Well, verse 10, and the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded and blossomed. I read that already. I did that. It's exactly the same thing I did at 6:30. I read verse 10 twice. What does it mean? Verse 11. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. Now I can imagine the butler went, really? Got all happy. Which caused the other guy to go, ooh, tell me mine, tell me. Listen, here's my dream. Notice, Joseph tells him he's going to be restored. And in verse 14 he says, but think on me when it shall be well with thee. And show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. And here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. Well, he uses 2 words, and 2 separate words, and it's translated in verse 14, house, and the different word, verse 15, translated dungeon. So within the house, there is a dungeon, or that the house is a dungeon. English Standard Version translates it pit. Now come on. You know what it's like to be down? Maybe it's not actually a pit, but it's a place that's very pit-like, isn't it? A rut, maybe. You're stuck in it. Somebody said a rut is just a grave with both the ends kicked out. Maybe you've been in a rut. Maybe you know what it's like to visit a pit. And I hope you just visited it and you're not actually sentenced to there. That's a place you can get out of. Joseph said, I have been falsely accused. I've done nothing that they should send me to this pit. It's a pit, and he's in it. Well, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. This guy goes, I had 3 in my dream, and my head was also involved in my dream. 3 white baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket, there was all manner of baked meats. That's King James Version. Baked goods, all these bakery foods are in the basket for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. The birds kept eating the baked goods out of the baskets, which were, again, they were on my head. He keeps mentioning his head. Joseph answered and said, I don't know. How do you present this one? Well, your head is involved. Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. 3 baskets or 3 days. Maybe Joseph went 3 baskets or, dude, it's 3 days. Here within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up your head from off you. Not so happy. And shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. Okay? Have a nice day. I do picture Joseph having a hard time delivering that interpretation. Verse 20 says, it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, which is absurd. Pharaoh's birthday, and he decides, you know what I want for my birthday? I'm going to execute somebody. It was Pharaoh's birthday that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. He lifted up both their heads. He restored the chief butler to his butlership again. I don't know why that amuses me, but it does. He restored the chief butler to his butlership, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand, and he hanged the chief baker. He did not return him to his bakership. He hung him, as Joseph had interpreted to them. So it may well be that the Pharaoh had been saving the execution for the occasion when all of these princes were going to be there and present. And can you think of a better time for an execution than your birthday? Anyway, so it happens. He takes action. Presumably, he has made a determination. He's had the attempted assassination thoroughly investigated and has come to a conclusion and will execute the one he believes is responsible. Verse 23, it hurts to read it. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgat him. Apparently there was a time in the English language when past tense for forget was forgat. There it is, the King James Version, F-O-R-G-A-T. Chief butler forgot. So poor Joe maybe had some hope. When the interpretation of their dreams was actually fulfilled and 3 days, 3 days, man. What Joseph told him was going to happen, happened. Maybe 4th day, he's thinking something might happen on his case. Maybe the 5th day, or the 6th. And those days really start piling up, and all hope just kind of went away. And look at the next verse of chapter 41. And then it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. 2 more years. You guys, he was 17 when he was sold. At some point in his 20s, sent to prison. 28, when he had a little glimpse of hope because of, the butler being returned to his butlership. 2 more years. 2 more years of waiting. Verse 1 says it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. Now when you read the river, you understand that's the Nile. The Nile River brings life into what would otherwise be just desert. And behold, they came up out of the river, which makes sense because for the Egyptian, everything comes up out of the river. The water that makes irrigation happen, out of that river came 7 well-favored kine. That's Old English for cows. Fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. They were so ugly that this was the nightmare. And then they, what they do, they cannibalize. The skinny ones were like just cow skeletons with leather. Well, verse 4 says, the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke, horrified. Cannibal cows, cannibal skinny cows. That was disturbing. Well, he slept and dreamed. The second time, and behold, 7 years of corn came up. All right, corn. The Old English uses the word corn. It doesn't mean corn like you understand corn. Corn, by the way, was engineered by the natives of North America. I don't know if you know that. Humanity has never been primitive. Sometimes we've had to do primitive stuff, but humans are created in the image of God and have been capable of amazing achievements. There's so much that people don't know, and there's all kinds of new archaeology and the new information in the study of genetics, retelling the story of the Americas from the time of the flood until the arrival of the Europeans on great wooden ships. A lot of things, empires had risen and fallen. We did not come here and then go to war with a undeveloped primitive people. We came and found the survivors of a destroyed empire. The natives of this land had genetically engineered corn out of crossbreeding with grasses. They produced a food that became a staple. Even as in South America, believe it or not, in South America, in the Andes Mountains, they did likewise genetically engineer the potato. Europe knew nothing about corn or the potato until Columbus came to America. And by the way, the vast grasslands of the Central Plains in our nation were not just naturally occurring grasslands, they were actually engineered grasslands, and fire was the primary tool used by the inhabitants of North America to eliminate the trees and the forests, and ultimately, instead of herding great flocks, they created a place where great herds could grow. They made the simple observation. I'm chasing a little history for a second. They made the simple observation that lightning strikes burn grass, and where the grass burned, better grass came up. So they began lighting big fires. They planned this. They lit massive fires in ancient America, and the ancient Americans benefited from the elimination of the trees and obstacles to their hunt, and they created vast pastures that were not just naturally occurring. Anyway, I chased all of that just because the King James Version uses the word corn, and you automatically picture an ear, a corn with yellow kernels. It was stalks of wheat, and it does that. That's just how it is. So, corn, he said. 7 thin ears. Well, verse 5, he slept and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. Oh, I got to do this again. King James Version. Rank and good. Now, we here in Maine, we use the word rank a little different now, don't we? My fellow Mainers. It's not a compliment. Wow, my kid's bedroom is rank. So understand, it actually meant fine-looking fat cows and fine-looking heads of grain, plump, rank and good. Verse 6, and behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them, and the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Surely you've had that experience where you dreamed and you woke up, you go, oh, it was a dream. But it was so real. It was so very real. Verse 8 says, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof, and Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. All right. He is tormented when he wakes up because he had a dream that he knows means something, but he has no idea what it means. He could tell that was too weird. It means something, but what does it mean? Now, you know he has a staff of people that are supposed to have special knowledge, special insights, and special skills. He consults them. Now, you've got to know that they made their attempt at interpreting. He tells them the dream, and they go, well, and they come up with their, lame, wrong interpretation. How does he know that what they have interpreted is not right? That they've not actually interpreted his dream? Well, I'll tell you as we read on. Verse 9, then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Now that's the butler saying, I am such a loser. I completely forgot something important. Verse 10, Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me, so he is speaking to a new Pharaoh of the old Pharaoh. Now this new Pharaoh, maybe the son of the grandson of the previous Pharaoh. Pharaoh, after all, is title. This Pharaoh is young. He is young enough to be humble and recognize his need for good counsel. He's young enough that later Joseph will say, God has made me father to Pharaoh. So this, the butler, has to cover the history. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and he put me in ward in the cabinet of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, a slave, to the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. It came to pass as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. And then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. So why is he in the dungeon? I do not know. Or maybe that is just a description of how bad the prison actually is, but they brought him out. Where they brought him out was a dungeon. Now, I suppose it's all relative, right? I mean, everything is kind of relative. I mean, maybe compared to where he goes, it was a dungeon. He's about to move into a palace. Man, what a difference a day can make. And what a difference your point of view can be. Just yesterday, I found myself in that place that I'd been many times before when I used to travel more on Friday and Saturday, go do ministry and then spend all of Saturday night trying to get back home. Everything was messed up in the Northeast, severe weather, all of that. Flights were a mess. And so first one flight was delayed, so they had to reroute. So I had to go from Rochester, New York, down to Charlotte, North Carolina, in order to come back up to Maine. So I was going to go from Rochester to Charlotte, Charlotte to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Bangor. Something's going to get messed up. And sure enough, it did. But I fly so much that American Airlines usually treats me pretty good. I'm like, I got status. It's like the only place on earth I have status. I have status, and they usually bump me up to first class. First class. And I'm telling you, we all turn into John Kerry real fast. And when you're up in first class, it can ruin you for coach. I'm not really huge or nothing, but I sure do like having more room up there, and, you know, I can sleep. I can study. Coach, man, I am sharing shoulder space with somebody, always. Or fighting over the armrest, give me the arm, or being a total Christian and letting them have the armrest. It's spiritual warfare, I tell you. But as I'm flying in, I get a notice. My app tells me they have canceled my Bangor flight. I'm getting to Philadelphia on time to make the connection, and they canceled it. And they rebooked me for Sunday, which means I'm not here preaching. I'm not here seeing your faces. Not home with the family. I am instead renting a car and driving all night long. It's a 10-hour drive. I'm doing the math. And I know I don't have time for a nap. But I can do this. I can pull it off if everything goes just right. If we land and I can get that car by 10 p.m. and get on the road, then 10 hours later I could be here by 8. I'd miss the 6:30 service. Oh, well. But it sounds like an awful night. It's going to be an awful night. Well, I get there and find out they didn't cancel. That flight wasn't canceled. The airline just made the assumption that I wasn't going to make the connection. They gave my seat away. My first class seat. They gave away 1F. They gave away 2C. I was outraged. I was appalled. I go trucking over there to the gate. I'm here just in time. And I try to use my boarding pass and it doesn't work. Sorry, you're not on this flight. What? Like I had to stand there and watch all of the peasants board. I had to stand there and listen. Group 1 is already on. That overhead bin space is taken. And I'm standing here while all of the commoners board my plane. And then they finally come up with a seat for me in the last one. They're waiting for me to get on the plane. Now, get on the plane. Passed through glaring at those people in first class that took my seat. No, I didn't do that. But I'm going to tell you something. After thinking about driving all night, Coach wasn't that bad. I'm like, man, I'm on a plane. I'm going to do an hour-and-a-half flight. I want to get to bed by midnight. That was actually, perspective does change, They brought Joseph out of the dungeon. That's how it's worded here, as Moses writes. They brought him. They called for him. Look at it. It says here, they did it hastily. Verse 14. Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto the Pharaoh. Okay, himself is in italics. He shaved. They put him through a serious makeover. Coming out of that prison, he probably had rags, and man, he had a hair and beard like Rip Van Winkle. Man, he's just doing time. Who knows? In prison, maybe you just do a Fu Manchu, so you just look bad. Just nobody mess with me. There's a prison look. And it ain't going to work in the palace. You got a shave and a haircut. Radical makeover. And a change of clothes. He came unto Pharaoh. Verse 15, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there's none that can interpret it. And I've heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered, I love the humility of Joe, saying, it's not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. An answer of peace. Now I happen to like how that's worded in the King James Version, because it explains how is it that others could take a stab at some lame attempt of interpreting his dreams, and he knows that that's not it. Versus, he can hear the true interpretation And there's a peace in his heart. There is that thing that C.S. Lewis called the ring of truth. There is that spiritual reality that there are things written in our heart, things that are deep in our heart that make it possible for us to hear something and know it's true, versus, that lack of peace. No, it was the peace. An answer of peace is what Pharaoh was looking for. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, verse 17, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored, and lean flesh, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And they were the ugliest skeleton cows that I ever saw. I saw them in my dream. And the lean and ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. They cannibalized the fat kine. Verse 21, and when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I woke. I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good, and behold, 7 ears withered and thin, blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them, and the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it unto me. Verse 25, Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Joseph said, what God has showed you is what God, is about to do. Joseph understands that God has his hands in the affairs of humanity. God has his hands. Nothing happens in this world that God doesn't have his hand in, that God has not either allowed or orchestrated. God is God. He is not, as the deist used to suggest, uninvolved. He just sort of sets everything into motion and then watches to see how it's all going to play out. No, God is actually involved. And when things are done, he is the one doing it. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. Verse 26. The 7 good kine are 7 years. The 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Right now, the world is aware of a deadly heat wave. Leave it to the politicians who are under the influence of the spirit of Antichrist to capitalize on every perceived crisis to expand power. This yesterday, from Epoch News, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has left the term global warming by the wayside, telling reporters that the era of global boiling has arrived for planet Earth. Did you know that? They've traded global warming for global boiling. The July 27 comment came out of the European Union's Copernicus program for Earth observation, stated that the first 3 weeks of July were the, quote, warmest 3-week period on record, end quote. The World Meteorological Association, an agency with the UN, which means you can't trust anything they say, also drew attention to the Copernicus ERA5 data. Copernicus also predicts this July will shatter a previous mark for the hottest July since the start of modern record keeping, which was set in 2019. So the record was just a couple of years ago. Now the comments also came after a buoy in Manatee Bay, Florida, gave a preliminary temperature reading of over 101 degrees Fahrenheit and a possible world record. Blah, 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 all of this just to say the time for half measures is over. All of that data capitalized on by the UN chief is all about expanding the power of a world government and capitalizing on what they perceive as a world threat, and they perceive it as a man-made crisis. And that is not sound science. The same people that lied to you a lot over the last few years are lying again, but they capitalize on certain realities. It's been hot. Who's doing that? God is the one doing the doing. They flatter themselves with the suggestion that man is so powerful that he is able to alter life on the planet. God is the one doing the doing. And a rational people would call out to God in prayer and say, God, I think you've got our attention. Yeah, it's hot. Have we done something to offend you? It is God who is doing the doing. Joseph said it again. It is God who is doing the doing. So once again, verse 32, actually verse 29, Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. There shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that, the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It's because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man, discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. So Joseph goes beyond interpreting the dream to advising this young Pharaoh. You need somebody in charge. You got here a management issue. God has shown you in time for you to do something about it. But it's going to require some deliberate action. It's going to require some management. So Pharaoh, he says to the young Pharaoh, you need a manager. That's what you need. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man, discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. Let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Joseph has the management skills to immediately know, based on you've got 7 really prosperous years, bountiful years, they're going to be followed by 7 awful years. There's a 14-year period where God has revealed what's going to happen with the climate. Joseph has the math skills. Where did that come from? Well, he's managed his father's family business. He managed the house of Pharaoh's very powerful captain of the guard, and he has managed Egypt's prison. He has been doing this his whole life. He hears the numbers, 14 years, and he said, you need to save 1/5 of everything that is harvested in those 7 years to get this nation through the 7 years that are going to follow. You got to store this up. Keep food in the cities. Verse 36, and that food shall be for the store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Verse 37, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Now, let me just briefly, if I may, address the subject of government. It's an undeniable reality that the most efficient form of government is a monarchy, but it can be efficiently evil or efficiently good. You eliminate all of the processes by which committees and groups of people have got to come together, things can be done quite efficiently when you're in absolute power. Unfortunately, through most of the history of the world, the king was wicked, and people were absolutely at the mercy of their king. But you can't deny that it is efficient. And the power of this king and the power of this kingdom is going to be expanded as a result of this whole thing. But that is also in the plan of God, because God is going to bring judgment down on this very empire that he is going to make more powerful through all of this. You'll see as we read on through all of this. And by the way, I must highly recommend to you once again Vishal Mangalwadi's book, The Book That Made Your World, how the Bible created the soul of Western civilization. I keep saying it. Some of you heard me say it before. Go get it. Order it online. It's not that expensive. It's a little paperback. That book will affect your perspective of world history and what happened here in the West, and how did a representative form of government come to exist, and why was it so prosperous, and so why did it create opportunity? I got to do this quickly. Verse 37, the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Good observation from this young Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Holy smoke. What a difference a day can make. Huh? What a difference. Everything can change in a day, friend. Oh, the changes are, check this one out. In verse 41, Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. Oh my. Now he had already gotten a shave and a change of clothes, but he gets a change of clothes again. Now he's got the best. Can you imagine? Fine linen on his skin, a ring of power on his hand, and gold chain. You've seen enough archaeology represented from Egypt to know that their chains are not just, they're like chains of plates. Joseph's chest was covered in gold, I'm telling you. In verse 43, and he made him to ride in the second chariot, which he had. So there was chariot 1, and there was chariot 2. Even like, we got Air Force 1 and Air Force 2 that Hunter Biden's been using to do his business with. But that's another subject. In chariot 2, Joseph gets a ride. And they cried before him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Holy smoke, I say again, can you imagine? Joseph, I don't even know at what point, one of the elements of his own dream just happens. And he didn't even have time to notice. People are bowing. He's being bowed to. This man who was a slave and now a forgotten, falsely accused prisoner in a foreign country is now being bowed to by the country itself. Verse 44, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I'm Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah, which seems to mean God speaks, right? Something to that effect. God has spoken. Zaphnath-Paneah. And he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. Now, okay, this is delicate because I say this and I run the risk of making somebody mad. I just don't think Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, was a homely girl. The same guy that gave him a ring of power, the same guy that gave him fine linen, the same guy that is seeking to bless him with gold blade all over his chest and a riding chariot too, and orders the whole nation to bow to him, has given him a wife. He didn't just come up with somebody nobody else wanted. He is seeking to bless him. Can you try for just a moment to put yourself in Joseph's sandals? And all of this in a day? I'm married. I have a wife. And she's a hottie. I'm married to a princess. Gold, fine linen, and a princess. And a big job. Verse 46, Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt, and in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, and laid up in the same. Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. I'll just tell you, there's some amazing archaeology in Egypt. And you know what else you all need to get? All of you have already by now watched the award-winning documentary called Patterns of Evidence that focuses on the Exodus. Have you done that? How many of you have seen Patterns of Evidence? I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to do it here. Just show it here at the church. Our screens aren't that good, though. You could actually get a better picture at home if you would just take the time to watch it. So watch it. It's available online, and you can do this. I'm telling you, it'll blow your mind. The archaeology, and there is also a compelling case to be made that if not just the Great Pyramid of Giza, or perhaps even the other pyramids as well, they were not, as the archaeologists have been trying to claim, graves. But at least for certain, a compelling case is made that the Great Pyramid of Giza is connected to Joseph and was built to store. It's a great granary. But the archaeology in Patterns of Evidence, you guys all know how you've been lied to by government agencies. Right? Remember when government agencies lied and then convinced, and I hate this word, the use of the word community. You know, everybody in the LGBTQ community and everybody in the African American community and all of those in the medical community. There was a medical community. And they all fell for the lies. They all just fell for the lies. They, all of them, got behind. I mean, the vast majority just said what they were told to say without actually thinking, without doing real science. So you know how it can go, right? When all of the prejudice of the medical community says, no, this vaccine is a wonderful thing, and you should all get the jab. Even now, the medical community is mutilating children. Well, the archaeological community of group thinkers have long argued that there is no evidence for the Exodus. There's no evidence that the Jews were ever in Egypt, or that they ever came out, or that Pharaoh lost a whole army. They say that for only one reason, because their community, the archaeological community, the archaeological establishment, is committed to one spot on the timeline that they associate with the biblical narrative of a certain Pharaoh. Merely adjust where you put these events on your timeline, and the evidence is overwhelming. So you all should watch Patterns of Evidence. It makes the case blow your mind. There's even even in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were given, when they come down, I'm getting ahead of the story, there is a pyramid. There is an archaeological presentation made by the Egyptians of great gratitude to a non-Egyptian from the north. Even statues, even representations of him still have the pigment, still have the color of his light skin and his red hair. Anyway, patterns of evidence. Oh, you got to see this part before you go, and it's time to go. It says here, in verse 49, Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea very much until he left numbering, for it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bare unto him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh. For he said, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. I earlier mentioned Vishal Magawati, the book that made your world. He has a thesis early in the book that makes a distinction between work, which can be gratifying and fulfilling, work, something we should all be engaged in, can be quite rewarding, versus toil, which you're just suffering hardship, just toil is what most of the world lives under. How is it that in America meaningful work became possible? People could escape where they were and escape toil and come here and no work. It's an amazing thing. Work versus toil. Why are there still people in parts of this world, women carrying water on their heads as if the water pump and various infrastructure had never been invented? Why? It's not a lack of knowledge. It's not a lack of economic opportunity. It's an ethic. A different ethic was created here by knowledge of the Scripture. Look at this. Joseph said, God has made me forget all my toil and my father's house. So he named his first son Manasseh, forgetting. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, or Ephraim. God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. He marvels that God has made it possible for him to forget his father's house. It doesn't mean he no longer thinks of them. It just means he's no longer focused. He's no longer obsessed with where he isn't. He's no longer agonized constantly every day. Now he has been able to forget, to refocus. He's got a family. And fruitful in the land of his affliction. Fruitful in the land of his affliction. And the verse 53 says, and the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. The 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto the Egyptians, go unto Joseph, and what he saith to you do. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians. No, welfare was not established, because it only creates poverty and destroys incentive. But that's another sermon for another time. But he sold it to them. He sold them, Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because the famine was so sore in all the land. Let me end with this application. Are you conscious? Are you able to actually be conscious that God is involved in your story, in every aspect of your story? Because he is. Are you aware that God is involved in the affairs of humanity, in the affairs of earth, in this universe? Because he is. And I'll add to that, he's able to cause all things to work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But for those of you who have known, as Joseph did, pain, hardship, toil, and affliction, Have you also been enabled by God and by his blessing to become forgetful? Has the Lord done that thing with you where he's enabled you by his goodness to refocus on the here and now instead of being stuck in the there and then back there? Has God done that thing in your life that has allowed you to be fruitful in the land of your affliction? And we all got troubles, and I don't know if there's ever going to be a season of life for any of us individually where we don't have the combination of blessings and troubles. But that's different from those seasons that are just characterized by affliction, as was the case with Joseph's awful, hard years. May the Lord do that in your life. May the Lord work in your heart and produce in you a forgetfulness, a refocusing, and may he make you fruitful. Cooperate with him, because he's no respecter of persons, and what he did for Joseph, he wants to do for you. And when he does, take note of it, as Joseph did.
Hey, thanks for listening. We pray that the Word of God will speak to your heart as you meditate on it. If we can help you grow, or if you have any questions, you can visit us at our website at ccbangor.org. Give us a phone call at area code 207-991-9555, or you can shoot us an email at office@ccbangor.org. On behalf of Pastor Ken and all of us here at Calvary Chapel Central Maine, we wish you grace and peace.